Hello, everyone. I'm Kai, one of the parachain developers in Linktree. Today, I'd like to share some thoughts with you about a comparison between Soulbound tokens and verifiable credentials. You might have heard about the word Soulbound tokens. It's rather new, but it's been a hot topic since it was created, especially after a paper called Find Web3 Souls was released. The paper itself was co-authored by Glenn, the Microsoft research, Puya, who works in Flashbots, and Vitalik, who is a co-founder of Ethereum. After the paper was published in May, it brought about a big round of discussion on various social platforms. People are talking about the concept itself and use cases, pros and cons, etc. On the other hand, the verifiable credentials, or VC for short, has been around the corner for a while. And there are also organizations like W3C that pushes the standardization process forward. Here are the outlines for today. I firstly introduce some background knowledge about SBTs and VCs, including the definitions and context. And then I go a bit deeper into the strengths comparisons between them. There are diverse use cases in reality, and SBTs and VCs, they might be suitable for different ones. After that, I concentrate on the privacy problem, which is arguably one of the most important topics on both of them. In fact, if you look at the discussions out there, privacy is definitely one of the biggest concerns that are mentioned many times. In the end, I'll make a short summary with the imaginations and directions in the future from my perspective. So let's start with the problems they're trying to solve. I think it's safe to say that in the current Web3 world, persons are identified by wallets. You might have seen the picture below, and this is one of the expectations or definitions for Web3, although it might be incomplete. So back into the Web 1.0, you could log in with your username and password to gain access to authorized content. For example, your personal profile on the website or some data which is exclusively visible to you. In Web 2.0, there are more ways to do that. There's also OAuth, which enables authentication from external sites. So it basically means you could log to one website with your Google account, with your Facebook account, for example, which makes it more convenient. In Web 3, you probably only need one wallet address, which is like a one-stop pass, and it allows you to serve the whole Web3 world and unlock all customized features and data. I think this is in no way wrong, but it also reflects the importance of the wallet, because it's almost the whole identity of yourself. Only the wallet can represent you. So if I put it in another way, you as a human are kind of flattened into the wallet. However, a wallet address is actually nothing more than random string of characters. I think you definitely know that in your MetaMask, in your Polkadot.js wallet, those hex numbers that start with 0x, you can't tell what kind of person is behind that wallet, right? I mean, the human characters. Is it assertive? Is it trustworthy? Is it active in the ecosystem, or has a person got a very good reputation? Things like that. It's impossible to tell just by looking at the wallet address. Apart from that, people are using wallets mostly for financial activities. So you could transfer balance, do the staking, for example. You could do the lending and borrowing. You could join the mining. When I say mining, I mean, for example, add liquidity to swap pools. But those are all financial activities. But life is more than that, actually. At the end of the day, humans are social animals. It doesn't mean that you have to be outgoing, but we are not isolated. We would need connections with each other. We need relationships with, for example, with families, with business partners, with friends, and so on. So as it's written here, the asset is stored inside the wallet, but not the human characters, especially the social properties. But those social properties would be needed for the for the representation of your reputation, so your trust, or as a proof of some social relationship. And those are well needed. So therefore, we'd like to actually extend the wallet functionality to either store or associate the social properties to it. So in my opinion, that's where the decentralized identifiers or DIDs come from. So basically, I think SBTs and VCs, they are trying to solve this problem, the social property problem, in their own ways. So if we look at the definitions of SBTs and VCs from the high level, like if you ask, what is SBTs and what is VCs? I would say, in its nature, SBT is just a token type. So you surely heard of NFT, those non-fungible tokens. It's also a token type. There's like corresponding Ethereum standard for it, and SBT is simply another token type. And you could imagine it as a non-transferable NFT. A VC is actually a more generic terminology. So it's a verifiable credential that is issued by some authority or third party to prove a certain assertion or claims of the holder of the VCs. So just from the definition, you would definitely know that there are different roles in a VC system or data model. I'll come back to it later. And from standard point of view, the standard of SBTs are not yet finalized. There are even two standards working process. And we still don't know which one will win. While for the VC, there are already a W3C data model for it. There are different roles and responsibilities for each party in that data model, and there are also a description for the data that is transferred between them, which is just how should the data look like. For example, the different definitions and terminologies as well, for example, the documents, the presentations, the proofs, the subject, and so on. Here is one example of the working process SBT standard, which is the ERC 5114. We are not going into details, but I would say it's pretty normal. It's similar to other well-known standards, for example, ERC 20 or ERC 71. If you look at this code snippet, you'll see we've got events and functions. For example, the mint event, which is fired anytime a new instance of such a token is minted. And there's also limitations when firing this event. There are functions which can return various information about the token itself, even resistant URIs. So basically, those events and functions, they are for the smart contract implementations. And those implementations will be used to mint or manage this token type. And here's a VC data model from W3C. As I mentioned, there are different roles in the system. There are issuers who is responsible to issue the credentials. And there are the holders who could acquire the VCs, who could store the VCs, who could extract information from one VC or different VCs, and even merge them to a new piece of the data, which is called presentations. And eventually, he or she could send the presentation to the verifier, who verifies the VCs and consumes the VCs. So for me, that's a consumer of the VCs or the users of the VCs. And there's a common infrastructure, those verifiable data registries. So those are basically the registries that maintains the different identifiers and schemas. So you could say it could be, for example, a registry for storing the VCs. And in my understanding, this standard is a data model standard from a high level. So it's not so strict. It's not like the technical protocol like TCP, IP, or HTTP, which means if you do not follow the protocol, your implementation will simply not work. This data model doesn't mention the implementation details and offers a lot of flexibility. For example, it doesn't say anything about the implementations of the registry, how it's implemented. It's completely free to choose, I think. Is it a centralized storage? Is it a database, for example? Is it cloud storage? Is it a distributed storage with encryptions? You could choose any one of them in your scenarios. So you are free to customize, I think, almost all parts of the model as long as it fits your needs. There's also some, for example, DID document. It shows the content of a document, but in the real use cases, we might only need a subset of the fields there, or we could even add our own fields. So it's very flexible. So I would say the common interests for both SBTs and VCs is that they are focusing on non-financial activities, especially the connections between human beings. And they are tightly related to the decentralized identifiers, the DIDs, and they normally serve as a proof of reputations or proof of achievement or proof of attendance, for example.
Now I'd like to go a little further to talk about the strengths of SBTs and VCs respectively. A strength or advantage of one party normally means the weak part of the other party, because if both parties do equally well, it wouldn't have been a strength. However, as we go through these points, you'll probably realize that many strengths could be a double-edged sword in the real use cases. It means when not used properly or imposed with some restrictions, it could incur bad results or misuse. We'll talk about the strengths for the SBT first. We'll go one by one here. The first one is easily decentralized issuers. So normally, decentralized is a good word in the Web3 world. People are looking for decentralization. It basically means that there's no single authority who can issue all types of SBTs. Or put it to another way, everyone could become the issuer of the SBT, even you and I, theoretically. So for example, my high school could be an SBT issuer and issue an SBT which proves that I completed all the courses and I was successfully graduated. A badminton club near my home could be the SBT issuer and issue an SBT saying I attended a competition that was held by them and I got the first place. My colleague David, he could be an SBT issuer and issue an SBT to me about the fact that we had a 30 minutes call at 5 p.m. yesterday. And you can see how powerful it is. But as more pieces of information flying around, you'll find that you could also issue fake SBTs with fake informations, with things that haven't happened. So unless we find a way to reject those SBTs, you can't stop them from being issued and being added to your name. It's a bit similar to the scam tokens, on those ERC20 tokens. So imagine someone transferred some ERC tokens to your wallet. You can't actually reject the transaction. So the tokens will be likely sit in your wallet forever. The second point is potentially revocable. So SBT issuers could revoke the SBT or invalidate the information. So for example, I can get an SBT from the fitness center proving my membership. But once I left, the SBT could be revoked so that the new visitors, they will not see my old membership anymore. And this ensures the validity of the data if it has some expiration property. So it makes sure that the data is always fresh. If you compare to VC, a VC can't be revoked naturally, which means, for example, in the previous example, you would get a paper from the fitness center about your membership. And once you left, you could still show the paper around and claiming that you are still the member. If someone really wants to verify the correctness of the information, they would have to contact the fitness center for help. And in that case, the fitness center is actually the issuer of the VC. And that's also why a VC, or in general, a certificate in the real life has always a timestamp associated with it. So for example, if you rent a house, the landlord would require the balance sheets of your bank account in the last 3 months. And that 3 months is actually the time constraint that ensures the freshness of the data. But again, revoked the SBT can be revoked. It means it can be manipulated by the issuer. So imagine the issuer gets hacked. In that case, it will probably display the wrong information. The third point is social recovery or social community recovery sometimes. And that's one of the highlights of the SBT. It means if you forget your private key, you could theoretically recover your wallet solely by providing or proving a series of your social activities or memberships. For example, you could ask different SBT issuers to issue SBT again to you. For example, that includes your university. You could ask them to issue your university degree again to you, the governance style that you joined for the online governance, for example. You could ask them to issue an SBT about your governance activities. You could also ask your offline meeting hosts to prove that you have been in one of the meetings. You just attended one of the meetings, for example. So when enough of those SBTs are gathered, it will be sufficient to prove that you are the person who conducted those social activities and finally prove that you are the owner of the soul. But again, so leaking those information sometimes make people uncomfortable because a lot of them are privacy related. So you actually do not want to reveal those to other people or to ask them to issue an SBT which becomes publicly visible on chain. And we will come to the privacy problem later. The fourth point is the natural composition of different claims on the same chain. I think that's easy to understand because it's just a simple token type for SBTs. There are different types of the SBTs represent different informations, and they naturally would be linked to your wallet. It's similar to the case that you could own a lot of NFTs, which are minted by different parties but represents different information, and they all belong to you. So you could see that you have an NFT galleries, right, which represents that your ownership of all the NFTs. So a similar thing happens to the SBTs. And one concern about that is, what about the cross-chain activities? Because all those SBTs or NFTs, they are actually Ethereum based. So what about I want to prove my governance activities on Polkadot? Is that possible with SBTs? I think that's still a question. Last but not least, the seamless integration with the existing on-chain protocols. I think that's also easy to comprehend because, again, SBT is simply a token type. It's not different from NFTs, again, just from the infrastructure point of view. So there are already a well-built or series of tools for the on-chain management of the NFTs, and it could be easily adjusted to be utilized for the SBTs. Now let's look at the strengths of the VCs. The first one is about the better or more flexible privacy handling. So for me, that's a benefit of having a more fine-grained controlling of privacy. So the holder of the VCs, they will have the freedom to choose which VCs to present, or even within a single VC, I could decide which part of the VC can be exposed. So imagine I got a VC from my university proving my membership. As long as the issuer of the VC, which is the university in this case, and myself, don't expose the VC, no one would have known that I'm from that university. Alternatively, I could even extract information from the VC saying, I'm a graduate, but I'm not telling you from which university I was graduated. That is completely possible. In that case, we only expose information that we want to expose, but nothing more. So if you compare it to the SBT, where all on-chain data is intrinsically visible to the public, you can't hide it once an SBT is issued. It's like when we inspect a wallet address with a blockchain explorer, you can't hide the asset. You can't hide the fact that you own a certain amount of token X. However, this privacy handling mode could cause problems. That's a unilateral privacy, which will be addressed in the upcoming slides. The following points are all about flexibility. Flexibilities, as mentioned, comes from the fact that VC is a generic term, and the data model itself by W3C is also very generic. It's actually so generic that it can be seen as a container for different types of data. The data could be a mixture of on-chain data and off-chain data. The claims or the proofs, they can come from different chains. That's not a problem at all. The implementation itself is also wide open. You don't have to follow any interfaces or preset APIs. You can simply write your own. Now we are sitting at privacy discussions. Generally speaking, we always have a trade-off between privacy and simplicity, which is easy to use for the users. So similar to the security and usability. I'm sure you have used the two-factor authentication or even more steps. Like before you confirm a transaction in online bank, they probably ask you for one-off authentication code that was sent to your mobile phone earlier, or a randomly generated code from the Google Authenticator. That will take you more time. That makes the whole procedure more complicated, but it increases the security level by a lot. So you see the balance there. And back to the privacy problems. I listed here the most important privacy problem for SBT and VC in my eyes. For the SBT, it's a publicity property of the on-chain data. So as I mentioned earlier, it's similar to all the transactions on the public blockchain. It can be viewed by everyone. And for the VC, it's a unilateral privacy. So it means that when using the VCs or verifying the statement in the VCs, it would require that the holder of the VCs to be available and willing to cooperate. Because only the holder can unveil the information of the VC, so either partially or completely. And this leads to bad efficiency, obviously. But luckily, we are devising plans to solve these problems. They are by no means perfect, but we hope that it could make improvements and bring the whole usage forward. So for the SBT, I think a solution that is proposed in the paper includes we firstly separate the data to the on-chain data and off-chain data part. And on-chain data is those data that we are willing to expose, so it's fully public. And the off-chain data could be stored within a private data store, for example, and we program the privacy. So that means we could make a smart contract, just as an example, that triggers the revealing of the content only upon some condition. For example, when the visitor or the requester of the data qualifies for some preset rules. The important thing here is programmable or configurable. That means the SBT holders can decide the game rules. For example, I can say only the same DAO members can view my proof of attendance in the last DAO meeting. Alternatively, I could put the private data on some privacy-preserving chains or encrypted data storages, but I only give out the decryption keys to the whitelisted users. So the hash or the link to the storage is public on chain. Everyone can see the link, it's not a problem, but only the people who have the decryption key can decrypt the data and really understand the content. And for the privacy problem for the VC, it has the main problem that holder has to authorize the VC usage unilaterally. A simple solution would be delegation. So you delegate a third party to have partial or complete access to your VCs. So similar to programmable SBTs, you could add rules by yourself to selectively grant access to trusted visitors. The third party doesn't have to be a person or organization, by the way. It can be automated, like a smart contract, like a code logic. Moreover, we would encourage the VC holders to only acquire the VCs that only contain the required information, but not more. So if I'm required to provide a VC that proves that I have 3 years working experience. Then if it's possible, I will urge the VC issuers to issue the VC that only contains the needed information, but no extra data like the company that I worked or the position that I worked as, and so on. So in fact, if you look at the potential solutions to the privacy problems for VCs and SBTs, you will find that they are following the same principle, which is to find a middle ground between the private and public data. For example, the SBT's on-chain data is fully public, so we shift some of the data to the private storage and only grant access permission selectively. While for the VCs, we could offload some of the privacy controlling to third parties to make it more public and more accessible to the visitors, even if we are not available in person. As a summary, we have reviewed the problems that both SBTs and VCs try to resolve, the background knowledge of them, the benefits of each, also more concretely the privacy problem and its potential solutions. So if we look at the future, we are looking for ways to solve the information reselling problem. Neither is doing very well at the moment, I would say, as it's really difficult to prevent that. You can revoke SBTs or credentials, but you can't revoke information that was already exposed. For example, I can invalidate the membership SBT of a fitness center, but I can't revoke information that I once joined that fitness center. We are looking at possible cooperations between SBTs and VCs. So personally, I think the social recovery mechanism from SBT is really interesting, and the privacy handling of VCs should be valued as well. And when it comes to the implementation, we could actually mix the usage of SBT and VC as long as it's meaningful for the use case. For example, the link in an SBT could actually point to a VC. And when we program the privacy in SBT, which means when we set the game rules, when we grant access, we could also get those information from a VC. It would be great if we could advance in terms of standardization. We are expecting the fixation of the SBT standard soon, and we hope there are some implementation standard of VC as well, so at least to some extent. Last but not least, we are looking for the aggregation of DIDs, which could bring all kinds of existing VCs and SBTs together for better management and more extensive use cases. And this is also what literature is focusing on. I listed here several references for my presentation. This includes the standards, the papers, the videos, the talks, the discussions. So if you have time, feel free to read it, watch it. I think that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed the talk. I hope it's inspirational and you can bring more attention to this topic. I'm Kai from Literature. If you have more thoughts on this, please feel free to contact me under this email address. Thank you for watching. Cheers. Bye.